So oftentimes when I speak to Christians, they think that the Old Testament has no relevance whatsoever. They talk about us being New Testament Christians. I would rather to talk about that we are biblical Christians. It's not Old Testament Christians or New Testament Christians. We are biblical Christians. The law, people say that, okay, we're not under law, we're under grace. But the law is a small slither of the Old Testament. There are many, many chapters that do not include the law in the Old Testament. So as a throwaway statement, then we should have nothing to do with the Old Testament because that's all law and now we're all grace, is a fairly infantile view of the Scriptures. The Bible talks about the Scriptures, and when it normally talks about the Scriptures, it's talking about the Old Testament. We know in the first several hundred years of the church, the early church fathers agreed on the canon of Scripture, which is what we currently have as the text in which we use to live a godly and a holy life before Jesus. 2 Peter 3 and verse 16, it talks about we can actually only understand the New Testament as we understand in the context of the Old Testament. So we have a language like this in the book of Hebrews, that the Old Testament was the shadow, but the New Testament is the reality. So they're not two books that are diametrically opposed to each other. They are books that highlight and help us to get the full view of God's revelation to mankind. In fact, Jesus says, I didn't come to destroy the law, I came to fulfill the law. And so to jettison the Old Testament because we think we're New Testament Christians, that would not be substantiated by Scripture, by church history, or by proper Bible hermeneutics.
Alpha, Omega.